And welcome to the first of what will be between 10 and 20, depending on how many volunteers we get, of a new series we called Cannamentor that we will release here during October. And the series is something that MITA has designed to help social equity applicants network into the community and find individuals who are willing to serve as mentors and help them along the way and help them with the process. So we thank our mentors in advance for their willingness to volunteer and their expertise and their willingness to share it with others. So our first Cannamentor is already lined up. She's waving over there. I got to look down here. So our first Cannamentor is already lined up, and it's Scheril, an old friend from Florida. We've worked together in the cannabis industry for, I don't know, I think we first met like 6 years ago at a conference in Florida. But let's go ahead and jump right in. And the point of this is introduce you to Scheril, a little bit about her expertise, what she's done, what she has to offer, and why she's a great person to reach out to. So let me go ahead and introduce you to Scheril Powell. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you, Dimitri? I'm so glad to be on Cannamentors and really honored to be the first Cannamentor. So thank you so much for that distinction.
Yeah, we're starting in Arizona, and we're doing this to help others so they can, because a lot of people come to our website, you know, there'll be 10 to 20 of you, and then we'll see how that works out. And if it works out, take it nationally. And as they roll out social equity programs, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, city, county, state, federal, we will be able to give people the opportunity to network to individuals like yourself who have such a depth of knowledge, and we'll get into that. So
oh yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Well, as mentioned, my name is Scheril Powell, Esquire. I'm a cannabis, agricultural, and dietary supplement attorney. I've been in this space for 5 years. This is my 6th year in the legal cannabis business. I wear a lot of hats. I spent my early years, the first 4, probably doing legalization work, going from one state to the next state, legalizing either marijuana or hemp. I am a licensed hemp farmer. And, you know, I have worked on applications for people to apply for their medical marijuana license as well as hemp licenses. I am in the ASTM D37 committee. I'm actually the chair for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for ASTM D37.
Can you explain a little bit about what that is? Because the acronym.
Yeah. ASTM is really important work, and they've been around for a long time. They are the key standards organization for the United States, and they're a global organization as well, based in Pennsylvania. So ASTM develops standards for hockey sticks, for biomass, for cannabis, for all types of different topics. So they have all these committees that are really super focused on one particular area. The D37 committee is focused on cannabis, and I've been a part of that for at least 4 years. I started working with ASTM as a representative for Jamaica. So I'm on the country of Jamaica's Cannabis Bureau of Standards, Cannabis Bureau of Standards Committee. So every so often I'll do virtual meetings, or I'll fly down to Jamaica and help them develop their standards there. I'm Jamaican by heritage, and Jamaica is one of the countries that have an MOU with the ASTM, along with other countries, like hundreds of other countries. So, you know, I chair that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, and my goal for that committee is to make sure that as we're developing standards, we're making sure they're not restrictive or prohibitive for people of various socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds to participate. And even looking at, is there an opportunity to have separate standards for whether it be kosher cannabis or Rastafarian sacramental use cannabis. So those are things that we explore in our committee. I also lead the work group for the global workshop. So the global workshop is going to be taking place December 14th and 15th, and we're going to have representatives presenting abstracts from all around the world. I'm one of the founding board members for the U.S. Hemp Building Association. I'm not on the board currently. I withdrew about a year ago, but the board's still continuing our work from the initial founding board. Really proud of what's going on. And I was just presenting on, they had a Hemp Build 2021 conference that you can actually sign up to watch the replays for that. I am also a business development manager for creative services. So we do background screening for the cannabis industry. And as an activist, I felt it was important for someone with our lens to get involved in the background screening process to kind of encourage license holders to screen for inclusion rather than screening for exclusion. And the reception from the license holders have been fantastic on that topic, and also working with the commissions and helping them do true social equity verification based on objective criteria. So making sure that social equity licenses actually go to social equity, qualified social equity candidates. So really passionate about that work. And again, I wanted to make sure that we had our community's representation in the background screening industry, which is legislated and it's also in all of the regs across the country.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. You're involved in a lot. Creative Services, is that a private company?
It is a private company based in Massachusetts, Mansfield, Massachusetts. We were just at NECAN. So if anyone was at NECAN conference, we had a booth there and I actually presented twice. My first presentation was on building high-performing teams in cannabis. And my second presentation, I actually stood in for a friend of mine who couldn't make it, and it was about compliance for medical patients. So I do a number of educational modules. I look forward to working with MITA and Dimitri as he's rolling out additional modules for social equity candidates. So they're equipped to not just enter the space, but stay in the space and become successful.
You know, I always like to highlight the private entities a little bit more, because obviously everybody needs to pay their bills, whether it's a lawyer, you need to bill hourly, an independent contractor. But Creative Services, obviously, that's nice. You're the business development manager for them. Is that correct?
I am,
And
for the cannabis sector.
And people need to understand that supporting a company like Creative Services is important, because they allow individuals like you to get involved in all these other things, which are volunteer stuff that we all do in this industry.
Correct.
Sorry, it was the thing there.
Yeah, education is so important to me. It always has been. I've been educating at conferences, as you mentioned, for the past 5-6 years, just delivering cannabis-rich content, making sure that people from various backgrounds can participate in the space, and really not saying, you know, hey, it's easy to get in, or, you know, selling a pipe dream, but really giving practical skills so that people can be successful regardless of their backgrounds.
Now, you said you've worked, obviously you worked in a number of different countries. Any other countries other than Jamaica, and what states have you dabbled in? You know, people, as they get involved, they understand at this point in history the nuances of the siloed structures of intrastate structures, and they understand the importance of understanding the marketplace they're getting involved in. So, you know, 5 years from now, that might not be as relevant, but what other states have you worked in other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with the international work. I've been in-house counsel for a number of large CBD manufacturing companies. In fact, the largest CBD retailer in the world. I was in-house for them for a couple of years. And I did I spearheaded their novel foods registration in the UK and Europe. So I'm familiar with the novel foods process. I understand how to, you know, get products registered in the UK, which is a newer process, and then also the EU, which the UK kind of built on the EU strategy. I have registered products in Jamaica, CBD products in Jamaica. I've also done some work in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with their regulations, working directly with the Minister of Agriculture, Saboto Caesar there. Of course, Canada, doing a number of things in Canada, like everyone else in the industry. When it comes to the United States, I helped work on the regs in Alabama on behalf of my clients and behalf of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I was their first general counsel for their first 3 years. So we were in Florida, of course, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina, Iowa, Nebraska, and that's where there were 2 CBD arrest cases that I was part of the defense team on. One in Iowa was the most recent one. Lacey Navin was the defendant, and she was successful in the end. She had her charges dismissed. And then Deborah Archer was in Nebraska. And the community supported them, and in both cases, the charges were dismissed. Now, did it take a couple of years for that to happen? Absolutely. Was it very important to make sure that precedent wasn't set in those cases? Absolutely. So, that's just some of the work on the CBD hemp side, but definitely nationwide legalization efforts for sure.
Well, excellent. We could use some of your knowledge here in Arizona, and it
I would
all
love to. I love
it
that.
all translates over. Just real quickly, because the way that I'm trying to structure this is so that individuals know very little about the cannabis industry, the licensing process, how the actual industry works, the financing, what happens afterwards. There's a big, ecosphere of cannabis. But they need guidance, they need help, they need individuals like yourself, they need individuals like myself. We only have so much time in the day to share with everyone. But when an acronym comes up or organization, I like to explain to people what it is, because I know the Minorities for Medical Marijuana group. Could
Yes.
you explain a little bit more about what they are? Because I know
Absolutely. So Minorities for Medical Marijuana, I guess they're in their 5th or 6th year now. The founder is Ross McCarthy, and the organization started out in Florida, and then we created sub-chapters, so chapters in different regions. So there's a New York president, a New Jersey president, I think there's an Arizona chapter, I'm not sure, but all across the country. There's a Jamaica chapter, there's a UK chapter, Canada chapter. So now there are chapters all over the country, and their objective really was to make sure there was legislation that allowed for minorities and people of various socioeconomic backgrounds, people with disabilities, and women to participate in the industry. So they work in partnership with a number of for-profit organizations to fund their educational programming. They do great legislative work across the country. So I highly recommend that people get involved with MITA. Definitely, if you're not a member, join Marijuana Industry Trade Association. But even beyond that, I think it would be beneficial for you to join Minorities for Medical Marijuana, especially if you're thinking of licenses in other states besides your own state.
Yeah, no, that's bringing up these things, and if somebody watches this, they're like, oh, that's another resource. That's another website I need to Google, see who's out there, see what's available to me to learn about this industry, see what they have available to me. And of course, when people come to MITA, they have hundreds of hours of information and experts like yourself who are willing to share that. And that's the goal. I always,
and we work so well together. Like, I love the camaraderie of our industry. It is a community united by the plant. And at the end of the day, all of us are here to free the plant, liberate the plant, and make sure that we create a robust industry, but a robust industry that allows for patients to not be treated as criminals. And even on the adult use side, I could still consider them patients and call them patients. I think a lot of people self-medicate, and I think we need to protect that right. So I love the work of MITA and the things that you're doing out there in Arizona. And Arizona is a really special place for me because I did get a chance to visit Sedona area, and it was a very spiritual place, very relaxing. Phoenix as well as Sedona, but I completely fell in love with not just the culture, but just the history. And I went on a number of tours, and even some of the rebellions of our Native Americans that took place there. I think it's something that everyone needs to understand, that part of history, and battling with cacti, throwing cacti at invaders and things like that. So I think there's a rich cultural heritage that I'd like to see reflected in the cannabis industry for Arizona as well.
Oh, it's complicated. It really is, because I'm personally very familiar with how the tribes in Southern Arizona were, they weren't targeted by the drug war, but every single family, for example, the Tohono O'odham Nation had a family member who was doing federal time or state time or tribal time for transporting. That was a big thing, because there's a corridor, there's a market route, people picking up at the border from the cartels and dropping off to the cartels in Tucson, Phoenix, and Casa Grande. And they suffered tremendously from the drug war, in a sense, because they were just trying to be entrepreneurs. But that's not in any way included in our Arizona social equity. I'm not sure that's even considered by social equity by some, so I'm actually quite, I've studied social equity and what is social equity for many years now. And that's why MITA kind of settled on the course that, okay, social equity is important. We're going to let somebody else figure out what that is. And we're going to provide education, information about how the industry works, and bring them individuals like yourself who can provide tremendous
Definitely.
amount of knowledge and resources, from retail, cultivation, manufacturing, regulatory, licensing, et cetera, and not get into the debate and the discussion of as to exactly who social equity, who deserves that kind of special support.
Yeah.
MITA's approach is like education, advocacy through education. Education is advocacy, or something like that, and we
Yeah.
kind of make it available to everyone. But
Yeah, I think the challenges are, one, the education, and two, the access to capital issues. I think you're right on target with where the need is. I know, there's an Ohio case a couple of years ago where they found that, cannabis distinctions based on race were unconstitutional. So I think that's why everyone made that pivot to disproportionately impacted areas, trying to still encompass those people that were targeted by law enforcement, and identifying those communities based on the arrest records. So I'm hoping that the approach in Arizona includes looking at tribesland and Native American hubs, as far as looking at the law enforcement presence there, and determining whether they qualify as disproportionately impacted areas. So that's really, really important and analytical work that needs to take place to make sure that we don't leave out our Native communities, that they're so important to our country, and also just indigenous knowledge about the plant. We need to preserve that as we move forward and continue.
excellent, yeah. And we'll see. We're waiting for the definitions this week, and then we'll have a couple months of application, October, November, into
Yeah.
December, of application planning. So it will be that licensing stage that people are going through right now. And I know you've been involved in licensing and applications.
Absolutely.
Ours in Arizona, a little bit more check the box. But people can reach out to you, during
Definitely.
this time or afterwards, after they've won the license. But why should people reach out to you now, sooner than later?
Yeah, well, I think one, the commissions should reach out to me as far as making sure that their social equity definitions and how they get their accurate information to determine the objective criteria for social equity, that they can utilize creative services. Some of the best practices we've developed with the state of Massachusetts, with having our agreement with the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. So that's one reason I'd love for increase, and I'm going to reach out to them, increase interaction with the Cannabis Control Commissions, so that we can make sure that all the decisions are made on accurate reports. Meaning, if it's a disproportionately impacted area, then we can do the address verification, because we do that for a number of industries: nuclear energy, universities, governments, et cetera, and so on. For reaching out to me as an individual, again, I work really closely with my clients. I help my clients build their teams. I help my clients identify resources. I work with my clients as far as developing their application. Again, creative services can do the due diligence on your investors to make sure they are who they say they are, that they have the funding that they say they have. I've heard too many sob stories as an attorney where someone's reaching out to me later rather than sooner, and they're like, "Oh, I signed these agreements. They said the lawyer was our lawyer, and now they're saying that I don't own this, the company that owns the license anymore." And unfortunately, there's very little that can be done, and it's really expensive to litigate. But those situations happen all the time. Unfortunately, I get calls after they've signed the operating agreements rather than before, where we can do the contract review together and work with the partner. Because sometimes the partners don't even know. It's really, making sure that, there's a lawyer to lawyer dialogue, that the legalese is explained appropriately to the candidate, to the applicant, or the license holder who's trying to gain investment. So we definitely want to take a step in the right direction with regards to predatory contracts. Not to paint a picture that all investors are bad. We work with investors too, so that they can vet these companies or potential applicants to make sure they really do meet their social equity criteria. So those are a couple reasons to reach out to me. But all around, like I live, work, and play in this industry. It is everything to me besides my family. I have really good contacts, and I have a great reputation from state to state to state as far as the work that I've done.
I'm curious if I'm a social equity applicant and I'm working with a lawyer, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I need somebody to help me review this, but lawyers are expensive. Is creative services in some way giving you time to help people out for free, or is that an expensive endeavor for a social equity applicant? How does that work?
That's a really good question.
I hate to ask, but I'm
No,
just
that's
trying
a
to think,
really
like,
good question,
I'd
actually.
love to call her, but I don't like wasting people's time. And she sounds expensive, and this is important. But that nuance that you nailed right there is like going to be on everybody's mind.
Sure. So creative services, I don't do legal work through creative services. I don't go give legal advice through creative services. I have my separate practice for that. So with creative services, we do look at discounting for equity candidates as far as background screening and employee screening, as well as due diligence screening for the equity applicant. So that's something we definitely consider. And we do customized pricing based on those requests. For my practice, SMP Law through Dumar Allsworth et al., I always discount for the community. So, I have a rate, and then I have a rate for the community. And when I say community, it's usually BIPOC community as well as, legacy cannabis community. So people who were activists, who were, people who have, who were wrongly incarcerated because of the plant. Though, those individuals I've always discounted my rates for, even like if it's a long-term contract or like I'm in-house for an organization, I discount my rates based on the amount of legal work that you're going to need. So I understand that, legal services can seem expensive, and it's just, for a lawyer, we just put a lot of time and money into getting the knowledge that we have, but it doesn't mean that we're not empathetic to the needs of the community. So I do a community legal clinic as well. With I think it's called South Florida Community Legal Clinic, something to that effect. And we just had a session last month. We do virtual visits as well, where we discount our rates through the community legal clinic. So that's another opportunity for people. But I just can't give legal advice for people outside of Florida because I'm a Florida barred attorney, but I do consult outside of Florida. So, feel free to reach out to me, and then we can talk about, rates and how we can work together to build multi-generational wealth. So just as much as I want multi-generational wealth for you, I would hope that you would want me to do the same thing by my family. And I've, all the people I've worked with in the past, they've been pleased with the fact that I've been extremely flexible when it comes to rates and payment options.
No, that's great. And we appreciate creative services. I get it. There's a lot of people doing good work with, ASTM type groups, medical marijuana, minorities and medical marijuana, the global workshop. I mean, this stuff doesn't, the hemp stuff, it doesn't pay. It's advocacy, it's education, it's advancing the industry, it's creating standards. But if, it's by having, the relationships with companies who support, social equity or other not-for-profit or charitable type of activities like creative services does, I think that's wonderful. So am I catching that that's a little bit about what they're about?
Yeah, definitely. They've been an investigations company for 45 years. So they really are tried and tested, have a rigorous validation. So if you want to, be FCRA compliant, which is the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which, governs along with the FTC and EEOC, how people utilize background screening reports. Like there's so many nuances, like even social media checks. People are hiring people and looking at their social media, but keep in mind that you can be viewing something that you're not supposed to see and making a decision. That's why you would use a company like Creative Services to do not only your employment screening, but also your social media screening, your driving record screening. Because let's say you go on someone's social media and then you see, an ultrasound and they're pregnant. Well, now you know that this candidate that you didn't know is pregnant is now pregnant, and you can't make a decision based on the fact that they're going to be possibly taking time off from maternity leave. So those are things that we don't think about as employers. And in the cannabis industry, like we have a lot of activist CEOs, we have a lot of patient CEOs, and that's what I love about the industry. But in order to sustain and keep those people in business and not having these lawsuits, that's why I do the work that I do. So I can say, hey, these are the best practices. This is how we can help you. Let us give you a screening report with just the information that you are allowed to see. Because if you're doing things on your own, then you may leave yourself vulnerable for a lawsuit. And that's not what I want for our legacy industry stakeholders. We're going to see big pharma, big tobacco, big food, all these traditional industries, and they have a right to entering into the cannabis industry. But how are we going to stay? The only way we're going to stay in the business is if our infrastructure is sound. And that's the module I've been teaching recently. Cannabis Science Conference, NECAN, is that building high performing teams. It's about screening as a part of it, but it's really about building a culture that is, starting out with your brand identity, having your brand identity translate into your employee policies, translate into your culture in your organization, but also translating onto your labels. And so that when, you have a customer who's looking at a shelf full of, CBD products or marijuana products, that yours sticks out, either it's because of, the narrative you've created around who your brand is. So there's a lot of key pieces that we're not really seeing a lot of education on. And that's where I've kind of plugged in the past year is, understanding brand identity, culture, screening, best practices, and really performance metrics, understanding that you can't just fire people. You should have a performance improvement plan to allow people to develop and grow in this business. Attrition is very expensive, really looking at profitability in the long term, not just looking at the short term. So those are other ways that I work with cannabis businesses. And those are some educational modules that I've been delivering across the country and around the world.
Well, that's fantastic. I was just at Hall of Flowers and I was thinking to myself that half those brands won't be there in a year from now or 2 years from now. And if they're doing things like, like the companies that you're associated with out there helping, members of the community, and people are more aware of that, from a brand perspective, they'll have a better chance to succeed. So I think
there's, thank you. And thank you for being so mission centered and being in those spaces like Hall of Flowers. I know we're going to see each other at MJ Biz as well, but what you just said is really critical. Like I look at the industry and I'm like, these guys aren't going to be here in a year. Like I've already seen with the pandemic, a lot of people fall off and go into other industries, but you have to really focus on your foundation. You have to focus on that culture. You can't just do the money grab. The companies who are doing the money grab, they win one day, but in the long run, they're going to lose because this is going to be extremely lucrative as an industry. We're making a lot of money now as an industry, but there's no limits to it, especially as the science advances and the acceptance from various communities. Our acceptance in the therapy community is very limited at this point. We're just at the tip of the iceberg with regard to therapeutic uses for the marijuana plant. Imagine when that breaks open and we start seeing, at psychology, psychiatry, therapy conventions, them talking, having really robust conversations about cannabis and having, peer-reviewed studies and things like that. The science is coming along right along with the industry, but we want the people who started it, who fought for it, to be there. But the only way you can is by not ostracizing traditional industry, but learning from them, because they're learning from us. When you go to a cannabis conference, right next to you is like GW Pharmaceutical and all these big tobacco. They're sitting right there getting educated along with you. What we need to do is get educated on the traditional side and really understand, the Food Safety Modernization Act. There's a Food Label Modernization Act that was just filed in Congress. We need to understand what that looks like, produce safety training, and really understand how we can meet the standards of traditional industry. GMP, understanding what GMP is, how you can be GMP certified. How do you identify a co-packer who's GMP certified? Those are the standards that we're not going to be able to avoid. The more legal we get, I used to say like a couple of years ago, more legal, more problems, but I'm trying to change that narrative where it's not problematic. It's really something we need to embrace, that as we become legal, it just opens up a whole area for us to learn. And I've always been that attorney to try to anticipate where in traditional industry we need to understand. Like I do a lot of work in dietary supplements. Why? Because I want to make sure that my hemp companies, that I can say, hey, let me get this information and take it back to you so you can still be here, because you need to know about DSHEA. You need to know about these laws that affect dietary supplements. We haven't even declared a dietary supplement yet on a federal level. We're begging for it, but we need to make sure we understand what that means as we're begging for it in the hemp space. And the same goes for the marijuana space with regards to understanding food policy as we're expanding the delivery systems, understand inhalation policy and vaping policy and things like that. We can't just stay siloed in looking at only cannabis laws anymore.
Now, it has become really complex and legal, and there are all these regulations and institutions, and my heart goes out to the old school cannabis dudes from the 70s, 80s, and 90s who were like, prohibition ended, but what the hell is all this? We didn't sign up for, all these different nuances that make it, we have to have our labels checked, our packaging checked. Oh, it's so much more easier just to produce in my back greenhouse and just sell it. Oh, so it's a tough world to navigate. And my heart
that's
goes
why
up.
we're here, though. That's why we're here, because we see it coming and we have to prepare them, or else it'll be an industry that we don't even recognize anymore.
Yeah, I'm a libertarian, so my heart goes out to the OGs. They ultimately they were the true libertarians, and I didn't even realize that. As an ex-prosecutor, I didn't have any particular sentiment about marijuana. That's a big misconception. Prosecutors just do their job as assigned to do their job by the legislature. But certainly now I've come to understand what they were doing and how they're operating. God bless them. And I hope they do find individuals to help them navigate into the now traditional market structure and marketplace and new regulations. But, Scheril, you've given us so much. I think people have gotten a pretty good idea about who you are and why they should reach out to you and work with you, which I think would be a fantastic asset to any organization, any team, any individual. Hopefully they won't ask you to volunteer too much of your time, but
I look forward to it. I love connecting. And I think again it comes from that common spirit of goodness. Like, you're not going to want me to work for free, because I don't work for free. I will discount my rates for people who are trying to do something good in the industry. But I wouldn't ask you, I wouldn't go into your store and say, hey, give me all this stuff for free. And I'm not going to expect you to, you shouldn't expect me to work for free. But there are ways that we can work together as a legacy community with the OGs, which I call them original geneticists. And, our OG community, they have a place, and they always will have a place. And we need to make sure that is the case, but we have to stay within the legal guidelines and parameters. So, we're the bridge, with the work that MITA is doing, the work that I do, we're the bridge between the traditional cannabis and traditional big industry, and how we deliver a safe product to the consumer that they will come back for time and time and again.
Yeah, I don't know if we're the bridge. I think we're more like the group that can tell you where the water is the least shallow, the most shallow.
Right.
Hey, the water's shallow over there, and probably want to try to cross over there. And think, I don't know if we can help you get across, but that's.
I say you're a bridge just because you recognize that what the future looks like, and that's why we are the bridge builders. You are not in denial about the fact that, once that MORE Act goes into effect, a lot of people have their records expunged, but that's the green light for a lot of other industries to get involved. Once the hemp derived and hemp and hemp derived CBD Market Stabilization and Consumer Protection Act goes into effect, there's going to be some big dietary supplement people coming in, big tobacco people coming in, so big food people coming in. So the reason why we're bridge builders is because we're not in denial. Like we're like, we see a few options as to where things can go, and regardless of the option, we're going to try to protect our people and help them get to the point that they can stay compliant and stay in business. And that's the goal. I want all the people who build this industry, as many of them as possible, to stay in business, especially ones just getting their licenses in the states that are just recognizing social equity. Like there's so many other companies that have a head start on them. How do we make sure that they can stay profitable and build something of importance for their families? That's what social equity is all about. It's remedying some of the wrongs of the past, but it's also preparing for a future where it levels the playing field as much as it can.
I think God needs some social equity lessons. Anyway, so I don't know why it just came to my mind, but yeah. So how do people get a hold of you?
Yes, you can get a hold of me by, you can email me directly. My email address for my law practice and everything else, speaking engagements, is SMP, like for Scheril Murray Powell, SMP Esquire, ESQUIRE @outlook.com. You can email me. I'm very responsive. With regards to creative services, you can go on our website, www.creativeservices.com, and select industries. And then the industry you select is cannabis. Or you can reach out to me by smurraypowell@creativeservices.com. So there are a few ways to get in touch with me. I guess the best way is like I'm on LinkedIn. So my name's spelled unusually SCHERIL. But if you put in SCHERIL, Scheril, you're most likely going to pop. I'm the only one who's going to pop up on Facebook. I'm the only one who's going to pop up on LinkedIn. And I post a lot for industry stakeholders, especially the ones that may not be in the know. So I read every morning so that you guys can stay looped in and information isn't used as currency as much against the smaller players.
Well, if you have anyone else who you think should be a Cannamentor under MITA's program for the national level, please send them our way. We're going to be grabbing more and more and presenting them here on our platform, and hopefully we'll be able to make some connections, and those connections will be able to help each other. And that's
I just thank you for having me on. I'm excited about what you're doing out in Arizona. I'm super geeked about getting involved in the Arizona market. I can't wait to see everybody at MJ Biz out in Vegas. And again, this is life to me. This isn't just something get the money and run. This is something where, again, 4 generations of my family have used cannabis in some shape or form for the benefit of their health. So I believe in it. It's a mission. It's mission driven. And I look forward to working with all of the social equity stakeholders. I also look forward to seeing you guys become the social equity stakeholders that help out, social equity people in other states that are kind of later, that are getting on board a little bit later. So we still have states that are still struggling with legalization, much less adult use. And you guys in Arizona, even though you think you're just getting in and you're late, you guys are going to be the leaders of tomorrow and be able to bring people on board. And I look forward to supporting you in that.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, we